Maybe if you'd spent less time playing lawyer for criminals and more time understanding real Americans, you wouldn't be sitting here today defending the very DEI policies that are destroying this country. Vice President J.D. Vance's voice sliced through the Senate Judiciary Committee room with the precise venom of someone who'd rehearsed this moment countless times in the mirror or maybe in the shower. Because let's be honest, Congresswoman, he went on, his words rolling like a prosecutor delivering a closing argument. You're only in that seat because of diversity quotas, not because you earned it. And now you want to lecture me, a man who actually came from poverty, who built businesses, who understands working families instead of defending the thugs who prey on them about accountability. That's rich, really rich, coming from a childless cat lady whose entire career has been about letting criminals walk free while real families suffer. The words hit the room like a grenade. Behind him, a phalanx of Silicon Valley investors and tech executives in $1,000 hoodies grinned and filmed on their phones. MAGA faithful bust in from 3 states away, erupted in applause. America first. Real patriot, someone shouted. David Sachs, sitting behind the vice president, was already typing furiously. P. Vance destroys woke DEI hire. This is why we invested in him. New turf. Silicon cope. The gallery was packed row after row of hand-picked supporters who viewed Vance as their Trojan horse, a man perfectly engineered for their purposes, blending Rust Belt populism with Stanford polish. Populist rhetoric powered by oligarch money. They'd waited for this exact moment. $15 million of their venture investment was about to deliver the viral clip they'd dreamed of. Vance leaned back in his chair, arms folded across his chest, the picture of smug satisfaction. He'd landed the blow. He'd given them the content. He could already imagine the headlines, the reaction videos, the hashtags. This would light up every right-wing podcast, from here to Austin. Across from him, Representative Jasmine Crockett hadn't moved an inch. She hadn't flinched. She hadn't even reached for her microphone. Her hands rested calmly on top of a worn leather briefcase, her expression tranquil, like the still surface of a lake before the storm. She let the applause continue. Let Vance bask in it. Let him think he'd won. 10 seconds. 15. 20. The cheers began to fade, confusion replacing enthusiasm as her silence lingered. Chairman Dick Durbin cleared his throat. Representative Crockett, would you like to respond to? No need, Mr. Chairman. Her voice was quiet, almost conversational, the tone of a surgeon calmly explaining to a patient how the operation will proceed. The vice president has made his position clear, she continued evenly. He believes I'm unqualified at DEI hire, a criminal defender, childless and part of the problem. Finally, she lifted her eyes to Vance. There was something in her gaze that made his smirk falter. Something steady, cold, and sharp. I appreciate his honesty, she said. It saves time. We can skip the pleasantries and get straight to the substance. She unlatched the briefcase with deliberate slowness. The metallic click was loud in the silence that followed. The vice president questions my qualifications, my career, my place at this table. That's his right. But since he's opened that door, I'd like to walk through it. She placed the case on the table, the lid folding back neatly. Let's discuss qualifications. Let's discuss careers. Let's discuss who actually earned their seat and who was purchased for $15 million by a billionaire who thinks democracy is a bug to be debugged. From the briefcase, she withdrew a simple manila folder. Not thick, not flashy. Just the kind prosecutors use when the evidence speaks for itself. I spent 12 years as a public defender in Dallas County. She began. My record, 287 cases. Of those, I won 98. Of those 98, 34 clients were later exonerated, proven innocent by DNA evidence or recanted testimony. She paused, eyes steady. I didn't defend criminals, Vice President. I defended the Constitution. Sometimes the people I defended were guilty. Sometimes they weren't. But every single time I made the government prove its case beyond a reasonable doubt. That's not coddling criminals. That's the Sixth Amendment, the same Constitution you swore an oath to defend. She set the folder down, never looking away from him. As for DEI, she continued. Since you brought it up, I graduated summa cum laude from Bowie State University. Top 5% of my class at SMU Dedman School of Law. Passed the Texas bar on my first attempt with a score in the 94th percentile. Elected to the Texas House in 2016. Re-elected twice. Elected to Congress in 2020. At what point in that trajectory did I become unqualified vice president? Was it when I was too black, too female, or too competent? The question hung in the air. The vice president opened his mouth as if to speak, then thought better of it. I'm not married. Crockett continued, her tone still calm. I don't have children. Those are facts. But you've turned them into a moral disqualification for public service. By your logic, George Washington, who had no biological children, lacked a stake in America's future. James Madison. No biological children couldn't understand family values. Every childless teacher, nurse, soldier, or civil servant in this country is somehow less invested in our nation's future because they haven't reproduced. Is that your position? She closed the folder with a soft thud. But I appreciate you raising the subject of qualifications and career achievements, Vice President, because that's precisely what we're here to discuss today. Not mine, yours. She reached back into the briefcase. Folder after folder emerged, each one thick with documents, each one unmarked, each a quiet promise of revelation. 10 folders in total. The room fell silent. The tech executive stopped recording. Vance's attorneys straightened in their seats. In the gallery, reporters leaned forward, fingers flying across keyboards. Crockett looked down at the line of folders, then back at Vance. When she spoke again, her voice dropped to a near whisper, but it carried to every corner of the room. You want to discuss who earned their seat, Vice President? She asked. Let's discuss it. You want to question qualifications? Perfect. Let's examine yours. Every flip, every flop, every deleted tweet, every billionaire dollar, every betrayal, every principle abandoned, every soul you sold. She placed her hand on the first folder, but didn't open it yet. I have 8 weeks of research here, she said. Forensic accountants, digital archaeologists, whistleblowers, constitutional scholars, and most damningly, your own words. Documented, time-stamped, archived. Everything you said before. Peter Thiel bought you everything since. Every contradiction, every calculation, every time you chose power over principle. Chairman Durbin leaned forward. Representative Crockett, you have 10 minutes for questioning. Crockett's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. 10 minutes, Mr. Chairman, I could spend 10 minutes just on February 2016. But fine, let's start somewhere. She opened the first folder. Let's start with who J.D. Vance actually is, or more precisely, who he's pretending to be this week, and who's paying for the performance. She flipped open the folder without drama. You're here to testify about executive branch accountability, she said. Instead, you've spent 15 minutes attacking my career, my family, and my qualifications, none of which are under investigation today. But since you've made it personal, let's talk qualifications." She drew out a document, reading calmly. 12 years as a public defender, 287 cases, 34 exonerations. Each time I forced the state to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. That's not coddling criminals. That's the Constitution in action. Her eyes lifted. You've called public defenders soft on crime 17 times in the past 2 years. Let me show you who else shared that view. She turned a page. Joe McCarthy, George Wallace. Every authoritarian in history who believed defending the accused was the same as defending the crime. The room had gone still. Vance's lawyers were no longer scrolling through their phones. As for DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, you said it yourself. Let's discuss. I graduated summa cum laude from Bowie State, top of my class at SMU. Passed the bar on my first try. Served in state government, then Congress. Tell me again when I became unqualified too. Black 2. Female 2. Competent. She looked at him the way seasoned attorneys look at witnesses who've just perjured themselves. Polite, curious, deadly. Chairman Durbin didn't need to gavel for order. The chamber was already quiet as a grave. Vice President Vance. You've completed your opening statement, he said. Representative Crockett, you have 10 minutes for questions. 10 minutes, she repeated softly, her smile just visible. Vice President Vance's reinventions are so extensive that 10 hours wouldn't be enough. But 10 minutes will do for a start. She reached for the first folder again, this time opening it wide. Even from the gallery, the thickness of the documents inside was visible. Screenshots, text messages, deleted tweets, recovered by digital forensics bank records, spanning 3 continents. Her team had worked 18-hour days, tracing money through shell companies and super PACs, decrypting signal messages, persuading former associates to turn witness. Let's begin with February 2016, she said. Your text message to Josh McLaurin, your Yale law roommate. Would you like to read it or shall I? Vance's face had shifted from smug superiority to the first flicker of concern. Behind him, Sachs froze mid-tweet. The crisis management team he'd waved off as unnecessary. It's Just Theater was likely enjoying brunch in Georgetown, blissfully unaware their client was imploding on live TV. Actually, Crockett said, pulling out a printed screenshot. Let me refresh your memory. She held up the document. February 2016. 4 days after Marco Rubio's debate collapse, you wrote, I go back and forth between thinking Trump is a cynical like Nixon, who wouldn't be that bad, and might even prove useful, or that he's America's Hitler. How's that for discouraging? Gasps rippled through the gallery. C-SPAN cameras zoomed in on the text, the Facebook Messenger header visible. This wasn't an isolated comment. Crockett continued. It was part of a pattern. July 2016. You wrote Trump makes people I care about afraid, immigrants, Muslims. Because of this, I find him reprehensible. October 2000. Fellow Christians, everyone is watching us when we apologize for this man. Lord help us. Same month you called him an idiot and noxious. All deleted in March 2021, right before you announced your Senate campaign. She turned a page. You even wrote an article for The Atlantic in 2016. Trump is cultural heroin. He makes some feel better for a bit, but he cannot fix what ails them. You compared his movement to your mother's opioid addiction. And now you're his enabler-in-chief. Vance's jaw tightened. Congresswoman? That was 8 years ago. People evolve. Evolve. Crockett interrupted smoothly. Let's trace that evolution, shall we? Crockett tapped the screen behind her, and a chronological chart appeared. Let's trace your evolution. Vice President. Her tone was surgical precise. February 2016. You called Trump America's Hitler. August 2016. Definitely not voting for Trump. October 2016. Fellow Christians, Lord help us. 2017 to 2021 was occasional Trump criticism. February 2021. Peter Thiel arranges your Mar-a-Lago meeting. March 2021. Every critical tweet deleted. April 2021. Senate campaign announced. July 2021. First Fox News apology. I was wrong about Trump. April 2022. Trump endorsement secured. July 2022. $15 million donation from Peter Thiel's Super PAC. November 2022. You win your Senate seat. July 2024 selected as Vice President. That's not evolution, Vice President. That's calculation. She let that hang for a moment, then added quietly, let's be more specific about the turning point. She flipped to another document. March 15th, when your first meeting with Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago, arranged by Peter Thiel. Attendees Trump, Thiel, you, and Donald Trump Jr. According to the New York Times, Thiel told Trump you were his guy for the Senate seat, that you'd be loyal, that you understood the new landscape. Crockett leaned forward. 3 weeks after that meeting, you deleted every critical tweet about Trump. Every single one. That's not evolution. That's covering your tracks. She turned another page. Then came the money. Peter Thiel's Protect Ohio Values. Super PAC, $15 million. The largest single candidate donation in Senate history. Not spread across candidates, not through a national committee. $15 million for one seat. A low murmur rolled through the hearing room. Even some of Vance's supporters looked uneasy. But here's what fascinates me most, Crockett continued. The transformation wasn't just political, it was linguistic. You didn't just change your mind about Trump. You changed your entire vocabulary, your cadence, your speech patterns. The display behind her shifted to linguistic analysis. Before 2021, you never used phrases like America first, deep state, or fake news in any speech article or interview. After March 2021, you used them 2 times in 6 months. You went from quoting Edmund Burke to quoting QAnon. From National Review to Tucker Carlson. From never Trump to never stop praising Trump. Vance's face flushed. Beads of sweat gathered at his temple. I changed my mind. Based on Trump's record, he said, his voice tight. His record, Crockett raised an eyebrow. His record in 2021 was attempting to overthrow an election, inciting January 6th, and facing multiple criminal investigations. That's the record that changed your mind. Or was it the $15 million that changed your bank account? The audience barely breathed. Crockett pulled out another document. Let me quote you from 2017, Vice President. You told Charlie Rose, our party has been very bad at adapting to the multiracial democracy we have. We can focus on economic insecurity or on white racial resentment. I worry we'll take the easy path, racial resentment. She looked straight at him. You identified the poison. You named it. And then you drank it. By 2022, you were running ads about replacement theory, claiming America was being stolen. You saw the moral test, and you failed it deliberately. Why, Vance didn't answer. His jaw moved as if he wanted to, but the words never came. Actually, Crockett said, opening the second folder, I can answer that for you. She lifted the tab marked The Thiel Connection. A large photo appeared on the monitor behind her. Peter Andreas Thiel, stone-faced, silver-haired, worth billions. Peter Andreas Thiel, she began net worth $7.9 billion. PayPal co-founder, early Facebook investor, Palantir founder, your mentor, employer, benefactor, and political kingmaker. She projected a timeline. 2011. You attend Thiel's talk at Yale Law School. You write it was the most significant moment of my time at Yale. 2016. Thiel hires you at Mithril Capital despite zero venture experience. 2019. Thiel backs your new firm, Naria Capital, with millions. 2021. Thiel arranges your Mar-a-Lago meeting. 2022. Thiel donates $15 million to your campaign. 2024. Thiel lobbies Trump to make you VP. Crockett's voice sharpened. You didn't find politics vice president. Peter Thiel purchased you a political career. She flipped another page. Let's examine what he bought. She displayed Vance's Senate voting record. You voted on $2 bills. 94% aligned with Thiel's business interests. That's not representation. That's return on investment. Document after document appeared on the screen. Cryptocurrency regulation, antitrust reform, surveillance contracts. You opposed every crypto restriction, she said. Peter Thiel has massive Bitcoin holdings. You voted against tech antitrust enforcement. Peter Thiel's companies depend on monopoly power. You promoted Palantir contracts at every opportunity. Peter Thiel founded Palantir. Her voice stayed cool, almost clinical. Government contracts to Palantir increased by $1.3 billion during your Senate tenure. You sat on the subcommittee approving those contracts. You voted for every single one. And your venture firm, Naria Capital. She continued invested in 3 companies doing business with Palantir. That's not public service. That's self-dealing. Vance leaned toward the microphone. Those investments were in a blind trust. Were they, Crockett asked, lifting another document. Your own disclosure forms show you as managing partner through T3. A blind trust requires no knowledge or control. You had both. These weren't blind investments, they were coordinated corruption. She projected an internal email obtained by a whistleblower. From you to a Naria Capital partner, dated March 20. Palantir contract should be approved next week. Let's accelerate the Cloudscale investment. Cloudscale is a Palantir subcontractor. You voted for the contract and invested in the beneficiary. Simultaneously, gasps broke out. Even Washington insiders looked shaken. But the most revealing document, Crockett said, pulling out another page, is this. On the screen appeared a campaign email. During your 2022 Senate campaign, you offered top donors a private dinner with J.D. and Peter Thiel. Minimum donation, $50,000. 18 donors attended. Total raised $2.1 million. She switched to a chart linking donors to legislation. Donor 1. Mark Andreessen issue crypto regulation. Your vote against regulation. Donor 2. David Sachs issue social media liability protection. Your vote maximum protection. Donor 3. Blake Masters issue campaign finance reform. Your vote against transparency. 18 donors. 18 votes matching their interests. 100% correlation. Her tone was flat, almost weary. You're not a senator vice president. You're a wholly owned subsidiary of Silicon Valley oligarchs. The color drained from Vance's face. Behind him, Sachs had stopped pretending to type and was quietly texting his lawyer. Staffers edged away, as though proximity might be contagious. "Let's move on to the intellectual foundation of this corruption," Crockett said, opening the third folder. The tab read, "The Puppet Masters." She turned a page. "You've credited Curtis Yarvin, also known as Mencius Moldbug, as a major influence on your thinking. For those unfamiliar, Mr. Yarvin is a blogger who believes democracy should be replaced with monarchy. He advocates for a national CEO with absolute power. He calls democracy a bug that should be debugged out of existence." And she held up one of Vance's own quotes. "In 2021, you said, 'I've learned a lot from Curtis Yarvin. He has an interesting perspective on how tech can interface with government.' That's a sanitized way of saying you admire someone who wants to end democracy. Document after document appeared: tweets, podcast transcripts, interviews. You follow Bronze Age pervert, a far-right influencer, promoting eugenics and natural aristocracy. You've praised Yarvin's idea that the country needs a Red Caesar to override democratic institutions. You told Vanity Fair you're post-liberal and skeptical of democracy itself." Crockett's voice hardened. "Let's be clear. These aren't conservative intellectuals. Russell Kirk was a conservative intellectual. William F. Buckley was a conservative intellectual. These are anti-democratic radicals who want to dismantle the American system and replace it with authoritarian tech rule. And you've drunk their poison." She displayed a transcript from a 2022 podcast. "You said, and I quote, 'What Trump should do is fire every civil servant in the executive branch and replace them with our people, not competent people, not qualified people, our people.'" "That's not reform," she said quietly. "That's a coup. You're describing Schedule F, the plan to eliminate civil service protections and turn government into a loyalty machine." She gestured toward the gallery, where former federal employees sat. Many fired under similar pretexts. These people lost their jobs for doing them correctly, for following the law, instead of you. And you have the nerve to call them the deep state, while you plot an actual deep state takeover funded by billionaires. The room was utterly still now. Even the air felt heavier. Several of Vance's Silicon Valley supporters stood and quietly left the room, apparently realizing they'd invested in something darker than they'd understood. Crockett turned a page. "Let's move to your attitudes toward women," she said, opening folder 4. "Because this frankly gets cruel." The tab read, "Childless Rage." She pressed play on a video clip projected behind her Tucker Carlson's show, July 2021. Vance's voice filled the chamber. "We are effectively running this country via the Democrats, via our corporate oligarchs, by a bunch of childless cat ladies who are miserable in their own lives and want to make the rest of the country miserable too. Look at Kamala Harris. Pete Buttigieg AOC. The entire future of the Democrats is controlled by people without children. How does it make sense to let people who have no stake in the future run the country?" Crockett paused the video. "Let's examine that statement, shall we?" She flipped a page. "Vice President Harris is a stepmother to Cole and Ella Emhoff. She raised them. She attended their school events. But stepchildren don't count to you." She lifted another page. "George Washington had no biological children. He adopted Martha's. By your logic, the father of our country had no stake in its future. James Madison, no biological children. By your logic, the architect of the Constitution didn't understand family values. Even some Republicans on the panel were shaking their heads now. But the cruelty goes deeper," Crockett said, her tone hardening. Gabby Giffords wrote, "My husband and I were trying to have a baby through IVF before I was shot. That dream was stolen from us. To suggest we are lesser is disgraceful." Jennifer Aniston wrote, "I pray your daughter is never denied eye care because you voted to take that away." She raised her eyes. "That last part matters, Vice President, because you didn't just insult childless Americans. You voted against helping them have children." She held up a sheet of paper. June 2024 IVF Protection Act. You voted no. September 24. Insurance coverage for fertility treatments. You voted no. Child tax credit. Expansion. Universal pre-K number paid family leave. Nemo. You say America is anti-family, but you vote against every policy that would help families. What you really mean when you say childless cat ladies, Crockett said, is that you want to punish women who don't conform to your Catholic integralist version of femininity. You want women at home producing children subservient, and women who don't comply, whether by choice, by biology, or by circumstance, you call miserable. She leaned forward. That's not family values. That's misogyny dressed up as policy. Vance's hands clenched the table. That's a gross mischaracterization. Is it? She countered. You said, and I quote, "Being childless makes people more sociopathic and makes our country less stable." You said childless teachers are brainwashing children. You proposed higher taxes for people without kids. You've turned infertility into a sin and independence into a crime. She set her notes down slowly. The people you're insulting, teachers, nurses, diplomats, soldiers, they serve this country every day. Meanwhile, you serve the people who paid for your seat. The silence that followed was absolute. The silence that followed was absolute, heavy as stone. Cameras hummed softly. No one in the hearing room moved. Then, Representative Crockett opened another folder. The fifth one. Its tab read, "The Fake Hillbilly." She looked directly at Vance. Your best-selling memoir, Hillbilly Elegy, made you a star, the so-called authentic voice of Appalachia. But there's a problem. Appalachians don't claim you. She held up local newspaper clippings, their headlines projected onto the screen behind her. He's not from here, says the Jackson, Kentucky newspaper. He spent summers visiting. That doesn't make you Appalachian. The Charleston Gazette Vance exploited our poverty for profit while offering no solutions. A map appeared marking Middletown, Ohio. You were born and raised here, a Cincinnati suburb. You spent a few summers visiting your grandmother in Jackson, Kentucky. Visiting. The rest of the year you lived in suburban Ohio, but you branded yourself as the voice of a region you barely knew. Her tone remained calm, but cutting. Your book's thesis was that Appalachian poverty is self-inflicted, that people lack discipline, initiative, values. You wrote, I may be white, but I don't identify with the white working class. I identify with anyone who works hard to get ahead. In other words, if you're poor, it's your fault. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. She flipped to another page. Economists, sociologists, and community organizers across Appalachia condemned your book as victim-blaming. It ignored the real causes of poverty, deindustrialization, corporate disinvestment, the collapse of healthcare systems, the opioid crisis created by pharmaceutical corporations. But acknowledging that would mean criticizing the oligarchs who now bankroll you. Crockett turned another page. Here's the cruel irony: you didn't escape poverty by grit alone. You were lifted by elite networks. Amy Chua at Yale mentored you. Peter Thiel hired you despite no venture experience. You benefited from the very elite systems you now pretend to despise. And instead of opening doors for others, you climbed the ladder and kicked it down. She lifted a sheet of paper. Your book earned $4 million. Your venture capital career, $30 million. Your Thiel-funded Senate campaign, unlimited resources. You became the thing you claimed to oppose a coastal elite selling bootstrap sermons to people you left behind. Her eyes narrowed slightly. And then there's the matter of your names. Born James Donald Bowman, changed to James David Hamill when your mother remarried. Changed again to J.D. Vance in 2013 before your own marriage, despite your book claiming you took your grandparents' name earlier. 3 names, 3 identities, each one chosen for advantage. She paused, her voice quiet. You're not a hillbilly vice president. You're a performance artist, and Appalachia deserves better than being your costume. She slid the 5th folder aside and opened the 6th, its tab labeled January 6th. January 6th, 2021. She began. A mob attacked the U.S. Capitol to prevent the certification of a democratic election. 5 people died. 140 officers were injured. Democracy itself hung by a thread. And you, Vice President, said you would have cut that thread. She pressed play on a video. Vance's face appeared on the monitors. If I had been Vice President, I would have told states like Pennsylvania and Georgia that we needed multiple slates of electors. I think the U.S. Congress should have fought over it from there. Crockett stopped the video. Let's be absolutely clear about what you said. You would have rejected certified electoral votes. You would have accepted fake electors' slates that were fraudulent, created through conspiracy and forgery. You would have overturned the will of 81 million voters. She held up a thick legal brief. Every constitutional scholar agrees the vice president's role is ceremonial. John Adams certified Jefferson's victory over him. Richard Nixon certified Kennedy's. Al Gore certified Bush's. 2 centuries of precedent, and you say you would have broken it. She changed slides. You also said you weren't sure Vice President Pence was in danger that day. Let's review what he experienced. Footage rolled across the screens, the mob chanting, "Hang Mike Pence." The gallows outside the Capitol, Secret Service radio chatter. We may have lost Pence, officers rushing him to safety as rioters came within 40 feet. That gallows wasn't metaphorical, Crockett said quietly. Those weren't tourists. They were trying to execute the vice president for doing his duty. And you questioned whether he was ever in danger. She pulled out another document. Officer Michael Fanone. I was dragged into the crowd, beaten, tased, almost killed. Officer Daniel Hodges. I was crushed in a doorway. I thought I would die. These men defended democracy while you now say you'd have destroyed it. And you dare to call yourself a patriot. Crockett opened the next folder. Springfield Lies. September 2024. She read, You amplified a conspiracy theory that Haitian immigrants in Springfield, Ohio, were eating people's pets. Murmurs rippled through the gallery. You spread that lie, knowing it was false. When called out, you said, if I have to create stories so the media pays attention, then that's what I'll do. Create stories. Not highlight, not amplify, create. She flipped the page. Springfield city officials. No credible reports. Ohio. Governor Mike DeWine. A Republican false. Department of Natural Resources. No evidence. Local police. No reports filed. The story originated from a Facebook post, amplified by neo-Nazis, validated by you. The consequences, she said, her voice firm, were immediate. Springfield received 33 bomb threats. Schools were evacuated. City Hall shut down. Haitian families, many legal immigrants terrorized. Children too afraid to attend school. All because you needed content. She pulled out one last document. Nathan Clark. His 11-year-old son, Aiden, was killed in a school bus accident. The driver was Haitian. You and Trump used Aiden's death to attack immigrants. Here's what Mr. Clark said at a city council meeting. She read, her voice steady but somber.